Why is a total stranger insisting on staying in our house for such an extended period? My sister-in-law's voice was sharp, laced with anger and disgust as she scolded me. Her piercing gaze made it clear she considered me nothing more than an intruder. After losing my beloved husband, I had continued living with my in-laws, the only family I had left on his side. Was I truly not allowed to stay? Did I no longer belong here? I never thought you were this kind of woman. Leave as soon as possible. Even my usually kind mother-in-law, whose warmth had once comforted me, began to criticize me harshly. The sting of her words felt like a dagger to my heart. If this was how it was going to be, then I would leave on my own. Those words screamed in my heart, but I swallowed them back, forcing my emotions into submission. I understand, I said, keeping my voice steady, even as a vow formed silently in my mind. This betrayal would not be forgotten. My name is Ella, and I am 40 years old. I work as an elementary school teacher, a career I had dedicated my life to with passion. My husband, Arthur, had also been an elementary school teacher, though he worked at a different school. He was 42 when he passed away, leaving a void in my life that nothing could fill. Arthur and I had been married for 12 years, our bond forming when we met at my first teaching job after graduating from college. He had been 2 years my senior, a reliable and knowledgeable colleague who had guided me through the complexities of school life. Through our work, we grew close, our admiration for one another deepening into love, culminating in marriage. I had always loved children, which was why I had become a teacher in the first place, but fate had been cruel. We never had any of our own. Arthur's father had passed away in his 50s, long before we got married, leaving my mother-in-law widowed and financially secure due to the real estate and assets he had left behind. When I married into the family, Arthur had already been living with her, and we continued the arrangement, contributing $2,000 every month to help with household expenses. We had a dream, one that required diligent saving. Despite the financial burden of supporting Arthur's mother, we remained dedicated to our goal. Both of us were deeply troubled by the increasing number of children who refused to attend school, and we had envisioned establishing a learning center, an environment where these children could study comfortably, free from the pressures of traditional education. Arthur's older sister, Harry, lived in another state with her husband. She had a son, Mason, who had left for college the previous spring, meaning it was now just the two of them at home. Though she lived over an hour away, Harry visited every weekend, seeking financial assistance from her mother. "My son's tuition is short, can you help a little?" she would ask in a soft, pleading voice. Without hesitation, my mother-in-law would sigh and say, "Really? It can't be helped. How much do you need?" Arthur found this increasingly frustrating. One day, unable to hold back, he asked, "Harry, you received a fair amount from Dad's inheritance, didn't you? Why are you always short on money?" His sister's response was sharp and defensive. "You don't have children, so you wouldn't understand. Raising a child is expensive. That inheritance won't last forever, you know." But even I could see that Harry's spending was excessive. One month, she asked for money for Mason's education. The next, it was for home repairs. Before that, she had claimed she needed funds for food. Each time, my mother-in-law provided her with a significant sum, enabling her habits. Then came the day that changed everything. It had started as an ordinary morning, routine and uneventful. Arthur and I went to our respective schools, neither of us suspecting that this day would be our last together. Until the phone call came. "Mrs. Thompson, your husband has collapsed. He's being rushed to the hospital. Please come immediately." The words barely registered. My heart pounded as I repeated, "What? My husband collapsed?" I could hardly breathe. Racing to the hospital, a desperate hope filled my mind. This had to be a mistake. He would be fine. He had to be. But when I arrived, Arthur was unconscious, undergoing emergency treatment. I watched helplessly as the doctors fought to save him. Despite their efforts, he passed away that night. I had no time to process the loss, no moment to grieve. I threw myself into handling the funeral arrangements, knowing I wouldn't survive if I let myself break down. My mother-in-law was devastated, receiving mourners with quiet dignity. My own family, my sister, her husband Jack, and their son Mason, offered their support, stepping in where they could. But Harry? She barely seemed to grieve. If anything, she looked relieved. After the funeral, as my sister-in-law's family departed without even stopping by my mother-in-law's home, I found myself alone with her. She spoke in a quiet, broken voice. Ella, I never imagined losing my son would be this lonely. Her words shattered the wall I had been holding up. Tears spilled down my face as my pent-up sorrow finally surfaced. If it's okay with you, my mother-in-law said, reaching for my hand, would you stay in this house forever? I don't want to be alone. Let's support each other, Mother, I whispered, gripping her hand tightly. But peace was not to last. Just as we settled into a quiet life together, my mother-in-law suddenly collapsed. It was a stroke, brought on, perhaps, by the stress of losing her son. She survived but was left with paralysis on her right side. Despite this, she was adamant about staying in her home. There are too many memories here. I want to spend my remaining years in this house, she said with determination. I ensured she received home care, despite my worries. Even after Arthur's passing, I continued contributing $2,000 monthly for her support. Then Harry started visiting more frequently. I'm just worried about Mom, she claimed, her concern insincere. I wasn't fooled. One day, my mother-in-law made a surprising announcement. Ella, Harry wants to live here with us, what do you think? What? And her husband? She says she'll come alone for now, maybe he'll join later. I couldn't shake my unease. When I had to leave for a week-long training, I gave my mother-in-law one last piece of advice. Mother, if Harry asks for money, don't give it to her, and if anything seems strange, call her husband. Upon my return, I was greeted with a smug smile from Harry. Mom wants to talk to you, she said, her tone dripping with satisfaction. An ominous feeling settled in my gut. Inside, my mother-in-law's expression was dark. Ella, were you trying to put me in a facility? She demanded. My heart stopped. Harry smirked. You said it yourself, didn't you, that you wanted to send Mom away because she was too much to handle? She was lying, twisting my words. My fists clenched, anger rising, but then, a memory surfaced, Arthur's envelope, the one he had tried to give me before he died. I rushed to find it, my hands shaking as I opened it. What I saw inside left me utterly speechless. The morning air was crisp as I left my parents' house, mentally preparing myself for another day at work. Despite everything that had happened recently, I had no choice but to carry on with my duties. Upon arriving at the school, I reported my training to the principal, then resumed my responsibilities as if my world had not been shaken. The day passed in a blur, filled with lessons, meetings, and the usual bustle of school life, but in the back of my mind, I was preoccupied with matters that had nothing to do with my job. As the clock neared the end of the workday, I gathered my belongings and prepared to leave. Excuse me, I'm heading out now, I said politely to my colleagues. One of them, a woman who had always been kind to me, gave me a sympathetic look. You must be exhausted after the training, and after everything that's happened. Losing your husband must be incredibly hard, just don't overdo it, okay? I nodded with a small smile, grateful for her concern, but the truth was, neither the fatigue from training nor the grief over Arthur's passing was the reason for my haste. My mind was set on something else entirely. I needed to contact Jack and discuss the troubling situation with my sister-in-law. Since the conversation could turn serious, I was reluctant to use my personal phone while still at work, where anyone might overhear. As I walked home, I quickly typed an email to Jack, requesting to meet in person to talk. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed with his reply. I have something to talk about regarding my wife, too, let's meet. Once home, I locked myself in my room and immediately dialed Jack's number. He answered almost instantly, as if he had been waiting for my call. Ella, I'm glad you called. I was just about to reach out to you, he said, relief evident in his voice. Without hesitation, I began explaining the situation. I told him how Harry had gone to her mother's house, spreading false accusations that I had conspired to send my mother-in-law to a nursing home to take over the house. As a result, I had been driven out. Jack was silent for a moment, then asked, Really, where are you staying now? At my parents' house, I replied. I then recounted the events that had transpired since Arthur's funeral. Jack let out a frustrated sigh. I'm really sorry you're going through this. You don't need to apologize, Jack, I assured him. Our conversation then turned to Harry's past behavior. She had a history of reckless spending, and it had only gotten worse since her son, Mason, had left for college. Wait. Harry was receiving money from her mother? What happened to that money? Jack asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. I hesitated. I know my mother-in-law has been giving her a significant amount. You didn't know? No, Jack said, sounding genuinely surprised. I've been covering Mason's tuition, and our finances have always been tight. If she's been getting extra money, I have no idea where it's gone. A sense of unease settled over me. Something wasn't adding up. Actually, Jack, I have a request. Can you come to my parents' house this Sunday? I felt a little nervous making such a request, but it was necessary. Their house was only about a 30-minute drive from my parents' place, and it would be a convenient meeting spot before heading to my mother-in-law's house together. Understood. I'll find my way there and contact you when I'm close, Jack agreed. Shortly after our conversation ended, my phone rang again. The caller ID showed it was from my mother-in-law's house. What could it be? Just a day after the previous confrontation? I answered hesitantly. Hello? Hey, you used money without permission, didn't you? Give it back immediately. My sister-in-law's furious voice rang through the speaker. I blinked in confusion. What are you talking about? What money? I checked Mom's bank account, and the balance is too low. What did you spend it on? She demanded. Her accusation was absurd. I hadn't taken any money. The only financial mishap on my part was that I had been so preoccupied with my mother-in-law's health that I had forgotten to deposit the planned $2,000, but I had never withdrawn money without permission. I think you're mistaken, I said firmly. Harry wasn't convinced. Come over on Sunday. We need to settle this. Her demand actually worked in my favor. Fine, let's discuss it in front of her, I agreed, ending the call. Sunday arrived, and Jack showed up at my parents' house earlier than expected. My mother looked surprised to see him. Oh, you are? She began. He's the husband of my late husband's sister. Mom, you've met him before, I explained. My mother's brow furrowed in thought before realization dawned. Oh, yes, I remember now. After exchanging greetings, I led Jack into the living room. Taking out an envelope, I placed it in front of him. I want you to see this. Inside were several photos and a detailed report. As Jack spread them out and examined them, his eyes widened. What is this? The images depicted Harry with a young man, having fun at a nightclub, entering a hotel. The report, from a detective agency, detailed her lavish spending. Arthur had this investigated before he passed away. He suspected something but never got the chance to discuss it with me. I only found these recently, I explained. Jack clenched his fists. I had my suspicions about her behavior, but to see this. He took a deep breath, his anger barely contained. Ella, come with me, we need to confront her. I had already planned to do so, of course. 30 minutes later, we arrived at my mother-in-law's house. I rang the doorbell. It's Ella, I've come as promised. From inside, Harry's irritated voice called out, How long are you going to make me wait? She unlocked the door but hesitated upon seeing Jack. When she tried to shut it again, he firmly held the doorknob. Harry, we need to talk, now. Her resistance crumbled. She let us in, though she kept us near the entrance, clearly wanting to avoid attracting her mother's attention. Jack wasted no time. He spread the photos in front of her. Is this you? Who's this man? Harry's face went pale. Where did you get these? No way. Who is he, Harry? Answer me, Jack demanded. Just a friend. What's wrong with having young friends? She snapped. Stop lying. I know everything, he countered. Harry's bravado cracked. Who told you? Jack delivered the final blow. Arthur had you investigated. He knew. And now, so do I. Her face crumpled in defeat. Jack's voice hardened. It's over, Harry, we're getting a divorce. She gasped. What? You heard me. I'll send the papers. Sign them. With that, the final chapter of their marriage began to close. Later, with legal intervention, the divorce was finalized, marking the end of a tumultuous era.